Well, hi everybody. I'm Carl Larsen from RMCG from the Soil Wealth and Integrated Crop Protection team here in the field at the East Gippsland Vegetable Innovation Days. And it's a little bit of a different setup this year with everything that's happening with COVID-19. So we've got a site limitation on at any one time, but we're happy to bring a couple of videos and live streams from the event. So today we're going to be walking through the cover crop trial with Kelvin Montagu from AHR and John Duff from the Queensland Department of Agriculture, just to take us through the different species and when you might use them and some of the benefits and drawbacks around termination and other such things. So Kelvin, I might hand over to you and flip my camera around so we can have a look at the field.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks for coming in and having a look. You know, I'd far rather be down at the site at Gippsland, but instead we're both John and I stuck up in our offices in New South Wales and Queensland. So we'll do our best to give you a bit of an overview. The demonstration planting that we put in had two planting dates. So the first two rows, so the other rows on your right, were planted way back in early February, and they were some summer cover crops that we just wanted to put in and give you a look at. And then there was some more of your traditional autumn type plantings, the last 5 rows. So you can see that first off it starts with oats and then it goes across to a mix, some ryegrass and a few other bits and pieces. So we'll start off first by looking at the summer cover crops. But before that, so the idea with this is just to really give you an idea of some of the different cover crops you can use. And it was really intended to be a point of discussion at the field day so that growers could come and have a look. And we were going to do a few different terminations, and we were going to have a strip till unit there as well. We'll be doing more of the strip till tomorrow or on Thursday at the panel session. So I hope you can join us, or you can view the video once it's recorded. So Carl, we might just pivot round to the sorghum. So this is really our industry standard. So sorghum's a great summer cover crop. It's incredibly robust. You know, it's pretty hard to go wrong with sorghum. And that's why it's so popular. It's popular up where John is as well, in summer up in Gatton. The main problem that people have with sorghum though is it gets too big and buffy. And as a result, it's just a bit of a problem at times to get back to your cash crop. So that's the main reason why we've put in a couple of options, and they're the millets. So right next to it is a Japanese millet, and then a bit further down we'll walk into a French white millet. Now again, these are one of the advantages of the millets over the sorghum is obviously they grow a lot shorter and a lot less biomass to work with. So if you're growing like a baby leaf, then this is an option rather than growing really large sort of sorghum. And the problem with sorghum, like I said, it's big and buffy, but it also has that crown root, which can be problematic when you're trying to get back to your cash crop. And you've got all those sort of stubble problems with that, with the crown. So with the millets, they're a lot shorter. So this is probably pushing it a bit far. That's 13 weeks since these millets were put in. And generally you might grow them for 7 to 8 weeks. So we were going to spray these out and then just leave them as a brown mulch. But you know, all the restrictions we had on it, that was a bit difficult. The good things about the millet is they're really quick growers. They are a little bit fussier than sorghum in terms of getting established. So you just have to be a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to sowing with the two millets. The other thing with the Japanese millet is it will handle wet feet a little bit better than the white millet or the French millet. And we can sort of see that after, I think, Carl, you said 200 mil of rainfall?
Yeah, so about 200 mils at the site over the past couple of months. So really quite heavy, particularly in the last fortnight. So that explains, yeah, as you said, Kelvin, why the French millet looks the way it does.
Yeah, so I'd say both those millets are a little bit past their use by date. I would have had them back in the ground or terminated after about 8 weeks. And then if you do run into wet weather, the French millets don't like it at all. Having said that, the French millets will stand up in drought better than probably the Japanese millet. So they're the sort of summer cover crops options you've got down there for grasses. And so if you are thinking of using cover crops and you're going to say baby leaf, or you don't want to cultivate too much, have a think about millets and maybe have a bit of a play with them to see how they fit into your system. But their advantages is they don't produce as much biomass, and you can sort of just shorten the window if you've only got a shorter time. John, have you got anything you want to add to the millets? You've grown a few millets up your way?
We've grown a little bit, and we did, with our field day, we tried to organise, we did have some millet in there, but again, it didn't like our growing conditions at the time of year. I haven't had a lot to do with them, so yeah, I can't say too much about them, unfortunately. But the sorghum, what variety of sorghum was that you were growing down there?
It was just a forage sorghum. And I should have mentioned that the seed was provided by Graham Seeds down the road.
Yep.
So we'll see some of their mixes as well.
Yeah,
I'd have to check to see exactly what forage sorghum it was, John.
Yeah, because we have been using either, previously it was fumigator as a biofumigant, and now it's currently scavenger. It's a little bit shorter, the new one, but they do also use sweet jumbo a heck of a lot around here, and they can generally cut that a couple of times and get some bales of hay out of it, so trying to get a bit of a cash return out of their cover crop rather than putting it all back into the ground, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the next one on your right, Carl, is sun hemp. Yeah. And I've got a good picture of sun hemp behind me.
Yep. And this is what it looks like after it flowers.
This is what it should look like. What we've done with sun hemp is we've started north, because it really likes the heat, and we've started right in the bottom of Tassie, and we keep bringing it in and further. We're just trying to work out exactly where we should stop growing it. And I think probably Gippsland is probably not the place for sun hemp. It's flowering, but in terms of biomass, it's pretty minimal. Whereas the one on my background here, you're probably getting somewhere around about the 150 kilograms of nitrogen out of that in the sort of biomass that you're producing. Whereas this one here, you're probably lucky to get 50 kilograms of nitrogen fixed through it. So probably it was a cool summer down there. It was a very unusual summer down there, cold, and it was just all over the place in terms of hot and cold, and plus all the smoke cover that they had for a very long time. You got to be careful you don't write something off after one season. It could be fine in a warmer season, but it's something that once we get so inland Victoria would do very well in the heat as long as you've got plenty of water, and then certainly Richmond, New South Wales up, it just loves it. So that's an interesting one, and the reason why I like sun hemp so much is that it's a very different legume to what we grow as a crop. So in terms of hosting soil-borne diseases and pests, it's quite different compared to a lot of your legumes that we might grow, like beans and peas and the likes. Whereas a lot of the other legumes are quite closely related to our crop plants. So we've got to try and juggle those things. Heading further down to those last plots that we sowed, and I think we'll run into some early sown barley, which has pretty much gone to seed. And then on our right is a mix of sorghum, tillage radish, and sun hemp. And you can see that there's pretty much no sun hemp survived the competition, and it's all sorghum and the tillage radish.
Tillage radish, yeah, but some very large tap roots here, you can see. With
yep. That. So they're doing a good job at like all the brassicas. They've got good deep roots. Some of the brassicas will go down 3-4 meters if you let them. So they can root very deeply. And that has a number of advantages in the veggie production system. Is one, it brings that nutrients up that might have leached below your root zone, so it'll bring those nutrients back to the surface. It'll help put some carbon at depth and try and stabilise your subsoil, open up some pores for the water to drain out of, which is really important, so that when we do get good rains, that it can drain away and we don't get waterlogging. And then you've got the sorghum that's producing a lot of the biomass. A little thing on mixes, usually your mixes will produce less biomass than a straight cover crop. So if you can remember the sorghum up at the top of the row, if we compare just the straight sorghum with the mix, which has sorghum and tillage radish, and you'll probably find some sun hemp in it, the biomass would probably be about 80%, because essentially you're taking the sorghum, which was covering the whole plot in the straight sorghum, and then you're replacing it with a bit of sun hemp and some tillage radish, which won't yield as much biomass. So that we often find that with multi-species, is they don't actually yield as much biomass if you can pick the winner. If you don't know, if you're not sure what the winner is in terms of growth, then the species mixes are quite good, because something will come through and produce a lot of biomass.
Yep, great. So I've reached the end of that row now, Kelvin.
Any other comments, Carl? It's pretty hard to see just looking at the video.
So I'll just spin around. There we go. Looking back the row we've just walked down.
So if you jump across one row, what we'll see there is side by side Moby barley, and one was sown early February and the other one's sown early March. So you can see some cereals you can sow early and they'll manage quite well. Cereal rye generally is pretty robust, but Moby's not quite as happy as being sown in sort of that midsummer. So you do sort of have to have a play sometimes just to see what will work. You don't often see barley being used as a cover crop. It's quite good if you're a bit short on water. Barley will tend to be better or more drought resistant than even cereal rye and your oats. So if I was really stressed for water and not going to irrigate it at all, and it was looking like a fairly dry year, I might go on with the barley for a change. The other good thing about Moby barley is an absolute sprinter. So in terms of getting a cover up and smothering out weeds, it's something really to have a good look at it. The cotyledons and the first few leaves it puts out are really rapid, and they really cover off the soil really well.
Yep. And good for a tight rotation too, I imagine, Kelvin, if you've got limited window to put something in.
Yep, so really good. So you're really after sprinters for those sorts of short windows. And I think if you've got 6 weeks, it's worth thinking about putting a cover crop in and just terminating it after 4 weeks. And so you want something that'll jump out of the ground and really get going. Just going back to the drought issue too, if you've got limited water, one of the problems with cover crops is it will dry the soil down. And so if that's a problem that you're worried about, then think about just terminating your cover crop early. So you could have possibly terminated this, 2 weeks early, and then, spray it out, just leave it lying on the surface as a mulch. And that way, if you get any rainfall, the efficiency of that rainfall getting into the soil and storing will be higher, and you'll probably replace the soil moisture that you use to grow it. And that's the sort of approach the broadacre croppers are using now. They're looking at targeted use of cover crops over summer to put a mulch on the soil so that the summer rainfall becomes more effective. And so often they'll spray out after, say, 50 days. And again, that's the sort of thinking that we could be using with this. So you don't always have to grow big, buffy type cover crops.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're just walking up the road.
Is cereal rye. And cereal rye is really a mainstay of the US cover cropping programs. And because of that, there is a hell of a lot of research on it. And one of the reasons why it's a mainstay in the US is it's cold tolerant. And when I say cold tolerant, I mean it can cope with snow. So, you know, we don't have that extreme. And so we can be a little bit more creative with our winter cover crops. So cereal rye is really good, and you'll see lots and lots of information about it because it's used so extensively in the US. But, you know, it's got its advantages, but sometimes there are benefits. Like barley, for example, will outgrow it in some situations.
Okay.
Most of these, the cereals you can also treat as an opportunity to control your broadleaf weeds by spraying over the top of them with a broadleaf herbicide or a herbicide that will take out broadleaves. And if that's an issue for you, it's worth thinking about. A lot of times you don't think about trying to control weeds in your cover crop. But in terms of using it as an integrated weed management approach to really get on top of your weeds, it's another option.
Yep.
The final cereal here is say oats, so a black oat. Again, doing you know very well, good cover, slightly behind the cereal rye, but it has some distinct advantages around soil-borne diseases and not hosting things. So it's one of the go-to, and I generally say, if in doubt, put a cereal in around soil-borne diseases, and if you're not sure which cereal to put in and you've got a soil-borne disease, I'd generally go with the sour oat.
Great. So we're at the end of our other row now. Looking back down.
So this one's the Graham's seed green manure mix. So maybe if you can just go in and get a bit closer.
So we'll have a look underneath and see what we've got.
So this is your classic green manure mix. So it'll have some legumes. I think I can see some peas there.
Yep, some peas in here.
Yep, there'll be, that looks like a bit of veg.
Yep.
I think I saw some faba beans before, and there's supposed to be lupin in, but I haven't seen anything. I don't know where you've seen it. Lupin can get swamped. Lupin's really good in cooler climates. You use quite a bit in Tassie and also at low pH, so you see a lot of it in WA. It's not so popular on the main eastern seaboard. And then it's got the cereals, the oats, and the rye corn. And you can see a few brassicas in there. I think a tillage radish.
Yeah, there's a little tillage radish under here too, which has definitely grown a lot slower than that other sorghum mix, which is interesting.
Yeah. So. Well, this was sown a month later. So okay, probably sown more your classic sort of early autumn type for a green crop. So look, mixes are good. They've got some limitations. The main reason why I tend to stick away from mixes is termination. So you're really limiting what termination method you can use. It's predominantly herbicide. So you're mowing. If you mow this, then the vetch will come away. So you are limited. Also, you've just got to be careful. You look at this thing here. You've got a legume. You've got brassicas in that, and you've got cereal. So the cereal will be all right in terms of your overall rotation and soil-borne diseases, but you've still got a legume and brassicas. So if you're growing that within your cropping cycle, then you know you're having some trouble in terms of a rotation to try and reduce your pest and diseases. The main thing, and the other thing is that sometimes they can be harder to sow simply because you've got different optimal soil depths for different seeds. And then generally the other thing that happens is the dominant plant tends to outcompete most of the other species. And I say if you're going to use a mix, you've really got to have at least a 3 to 4 month window, so that you can maybe manage it, so that some of those other species can come through, like the vetch might come through a bit later. So you sort of got to have a bit more time if you're going to put a multi-species mix in. It's also more expensive, particularly if you start to add a whole lot of other more exotic type things like chicory and plantain, and the seed costs can get quite high.
Mm.
So if you are going to go mixes, really think about you need a lot more time, and you need to be potentially managing it. You need to maybe cut it and take a hay crop, or be grazing it, or doing something to get some value out of it.
So Kelvin, would it also mean getting the right combination of, or right amounts of different varieties in that mix, so you don't get this one dominating the other more so?
Yeah, the mixes are a bit more sensitive, and it will depend a lot on the weather when you sow it too, John, about what comes away and dominates. But generally, you know, the sprinters will dominate, and, you know, we can see that with the cereals. They'll settle down, and the other things will come through. And the classic one is if you put a mix like like an oat vetch type mix in over winter up our way, you know, the oats will go really well over winter, but come late winter, early spring, the vetch will just take off, and because it's got something to climb on, up it goes, and you'll get a really good mix of oat and vetch. And the same if you do it with a pea, same sort of thing will happen. In the case we're looking at here, it's a ryegrass, which is what it looks like, but there was also clover in that mix. And again,
we found a little bit before, and it's right underneath there, pretty hard to see. So it's definitely been outcompeted.
Yeah, so it's probably a bit heavy on the ryegrass if you wanted a bit of clover to come through. And I mean, it's a classic pasture mix of clover and ryegrass. And so normally the cows would come along and chew the top off the ryegrass, and the legumes would be able to come through a bit more.
So you can see just a little bit of clover there at the bottom.
If you don't cut that ryegrass, then that clover will do nothing. So you know, ryegrass is a great cover crop. You can spray that off really early and still get benefits from it, because a lot of times it's the roots that are doing the job. We're going to jump to Carl. If you just wait there,
yep,
and probably go back to the Caliente, and John will jump in and.
Yeah, great.
So as part of these cover crops, we're looking at brassica biofumigants. We've got 3 in this demonstration site to showcase. I guess we're at BQ mulch, this one at flowering at the moment. It's probably the quickest of all the biofumigants to flower. It's a mixture, unfortunately. One variety flowers a lot quicker than the other, but you can't wait until that second one flowers, because by then you've got seed setting from the first variety. They do get diseases or insects, as you can see. There's a lot of holes on those leaves, most likely due to diamondback moth or one of the other caterpillar pests. Have these actually been sprayed at all, Carl? Do you know?
They haven't been sprayed at all, no. But we've also got some good guys in there doing some work.
Yeah.
Few ladybirds. And
you know, once they flower, they do attract a lot of insect activity, a lot of beneficial insects. But that's at the stage now where that should be incorporated into the ground. If you leave it too much longer, those flowers, they're going to set seed, and they're going to create a problem for your next crop. So generally, the rule of thumb with those brassicas, once they start flowering, anything up to 25% flowering, that's when you really want to knock them in the ground. And mixtures can be difficult in this regards, because unless you get 2 varieties that flower together, it can be difficult. You just have to go with the first one.
What would you use BQ mulch for, John?
Look, I guess it's really up to the individual as to what they want to grow it for. It's very quick. We've had it flowering within, or well under 40 days. So 35, 36 days is the quickest we've had that flowering. So if you've only got a small window of opportunity, you can put it in just as a cover crop itself. It doesn't produce a lot of biomass, but it will help, especially if you've got a period of time in the year where you've got a lot of rainfall coming. It will help stabilize the soil. They do have deep tap roots, as you've already mentioned. It can be effective against certain soil-borne pathogens. We've been looking at it against Sclerotium rossii, or that's a summer-borne pathogen. But it's effective at different times of the year. So depending on when you want to plant it, you can get more of an effect than others. And with these brassicas, we have shown that you can grow them any time of the year as well. Even though brassicas are typically a winter growing crop or a cool season crop, we have shown that you can grow them 12 months of the year if you've got the water. And that was in as far north as Bundaberg too, John. That's right. So a Gippsland sun would be able to cope with any of the biofumigants. Yeah, and as you can see here, they do produce a nice deep taproot. So if you've got moisture in the ground, once they're established and they can tap into that moisture in the ground, then they're usually pretty good. Probably the main negative for the brassica biofumigants is the pests. It is, traps. Yeah. And also the whole fact that many growers are growing the brassica in their rotation. Yeah. Already,
so it's not breaking it up.
Yeah. Yeah. There was some early work done down in Tassie, John, that found BQ mulch was effective against sclerotinia. Yeah, different times of the year as well. We found that these brassicas are better performers during the summer months, and we feel that because they don't really grow in summer all that well, they're stressed more, and therefore they're producing more chemical, or more of the right kind of chemical to fight or to control the various soil-borne pathogens. And we got a better response against a number of different pathogens during the summer compared to winter. Winter, certainly they grow a lot better. You get a lot more biomass, but it does take them longer. But yeah, summer was by far the better time to be growing them. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to just turn around, Carl, and the other thing that you mentioned there, John, was that the BQ mulch is a mix, and they recently changed the species mix, which always causes a few bother, because we do the trials on one mix with the two species, and then they change one of the species, and the results are not applicable anymore. That's what happened to me in the early part of this project. We were playing with the old mix, which was a black mustard and a brassica napus, which is very close to canola, and then they go and change it to the black mustard and an Ethiopian mustard. And so the results that we've generated on the old mix, you really can't extrapolate all that well to the new mix. But yeah, so this one is Nemat. It's a very short variety as well, but it produces a lot of material. As the name suggests, Nemat is supposed to have an effect against nematodes. It's like a trap crop. It brings them into the plant, and the nematode just can't survive on the roots. We haven't really looked at nematodes with this, but overseas literature does indicate that it has some potential. Yeah, we've done one trial down in the glass houses in South Australia, where we had a Nemat and a couple of the sorghum. So the sweet jumbo that you mentioned earlier, plus the new what's it called now? What's the new one? A scavenger. Scavenger. And we found that basically the Nemat was as good as a fallow in reducing nematode numbers. Yeah.
So, fallow is a pretty good control method. So we were happy that the numbers came down with the nemat. And so what happens is it attracts the nematode. The instar burrows into the roots, and then the chemical within the roots just stops its development. So basically it doesn't progress further. So you don't get that next generation of nematodes. And they can go through a number of generations in a summer.
Yeah. And we haven't done, with the nemat, you can actually mow it off and let it regrow. We haven't really looked at that side of things, but apparently you can. I guess the other name for it is rocket as well, so you can use it. You can actually eat it if you wanted to.
Yep.
A little bit peppery for my taste, but it's fairly low grown. It's supposed to be a little bit more drought tolerant as well. And it usually takes about 2 months before that one flowers. So it does take a little bit longer compared to the BQ mulch. But I guess there is promise for that one. It has a very dense canopy, as you can see, so it does smother weeds very quickly, and it does grow relatively fast. But yeah, the other one which we've got in the trial, which is down the other end, and we'll probably get there eventually, is the Caliente. It's the new formulation, Caliente Rojo. It's supposed to be hotter than the straight Caliente.
So when you say hotter,
for you now, John.
Yeah, so when you say hotter, John, you're meaning higher concentration of the biofumigant.
More glucosinolates in the actual plant itself. So it's supposed to have more of an effect against the various soil-borne pathogens. We haven't done a lot of work with that variety. As you can see, it's got the leaves a lot more purpling in the leaves, which is supposed to be an indicator of more glucosinolates, but we haven't really looked at it in that respect. And as you can see, it still gets attacked by caterpillars quite heavily.
Yeah, it's got quite a bit of damage, yeah.
So some of them you do need to put a little bit more care in growing. And as you can see, it does produce nice deep tap roots.
There's certainly, even beyond the biofumigant, John, they've got a good root system on them. You can see the fibrous roots on the surface.
Yeah.
And then they will go deep. Like I said, just the straight canola will go 3-4 meters.
These ones are these are fairly short, so they've probably got another number of weeks growth ahead of them, so they'll get even bigger if they're looked after.
But those roots will be going down, I'd say probably at least 1 meter even now.
Yeah.
If you could dig a hole and not just pull them out like Carl.
That's right.
Pull them out. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I can't do my shovel one-handed with an iPad in my hand, so we'll work on it for the next video.
You need to get yourself a cameraman.
That's right.
But they, like you see, they do get attacked by caterpillars mostly. Nemat's probably one of the few that is fairly tolerant to a lot of insects and diseases. So that's another good reason for growing that one. You don't need a lot of input into it. But your Calientes, your BQ mulch, they do get attacked by insects. And so you do need a little bit, give them a little bit more care, a little bit more TLC to get the maximum benefit out of them.
All right, and probably there's one other row next to you, which is buckwheat. It's looking a bit ratty.
It is a little bit, yes.
So so that was sown early March. So it's coming up 8 weeks, which is, look, in terms of flowering, it's not actually setting seed yet, is it?
No, we're probably just about to.
Yeah, I'm surprised because normally over summer, I'd say it's about a 4-week cover crop before you got to terminate it. And I know certainly if you sow that later in the year, then the time to setting seed extends out quite a bit. So I've sown some up here in New South Wales, and it can go for 3 months without really setting seed if you sow it in May. But I'm not sure why I'm not quite sure. I can't see why what's causing it to defoliate. It doesn't look real healthy.
What's your water quality like?
Yeah.
Yeah, look reasonably good
salinity.
in the Lindenau Valley. Wouldn't be saline or anything like that.
Yeah.
So,
because normally it's a pretty robust. I saw there was a photo taken of it about 2 weeks ago, and it looked good. And I would have said probably it was the time to terminate it about then.
time to spray then, yeah. So it might be just past it.
That was about 6 weeks, and I would have been my guess is to terminate then. But
yeah.
you know, just with the restrictions, we were struggling to get things in the ground.
Yeah.
So look, buckwheat's a good one in terms of it's a short cover crop. It's really good for weed control. Some of our colleagues that have been looking at integrated weed management have looked at cover crops, and buckwheat comes out as one of the top performers. It's just out of the ground so quick, it outcompetes weeds. So it's got that advantage. So if you've got a short window, you really need to be having a look at buckwheat in the warmer months. It does take about a 3 degree frost to kill it. So it's more tolerant of the cold than what you'd believe. And I guess that sort of reinforces a point around that. Just be careful when you're getting information off the web from North America, Europe, what they call a bad frost or a cold tolerant is quite different to what we'd think of. We don't get anywhere near the low temperatures that they do. So we can grow a lot of things through winter that they wouldn't even think about.
I guess we've been trying buckwheat as well up here, and the added benefit of buckwheat is the flowers are great for attracting a lot of your beneficial insects.
Mm-hmm.
So we're now looking at buckwheat as a companion plant, especially in brassicas, to see whether we can encourage beneficial insects, and any beneficial insect releases, the flowers act as a food source for them, for the adults, so they'll stick around for longer, and they don't have to forage quite as far out of the crop for food. So
yeah. Darren Schrewer down the road has actually got working with another group looking exactly that, looking at using buckwheat as a pollen and nectar source for beneficials.
Yeah, it's very good.
Excellent.
Look, Carl, I think we might just a quick sum up, and I
great.
Just want to make the point is that this was just really a demonstration so that we could have a bit of a chat about different management practices in there rather than focusing on the different cover crops. But you know, when you come into cover crops, be really clear about what your objective is. What are you trying to achieve with your cover crop? Because that will drive a lot of your decisions around what cover crop to use. So be really clear on that. Know what sort of window you've got, you know, and that's both in terms of timing, but also temperature and water. And then finally, I say, before you even sow your cover crop, make sure you know how you're going to terminate it and get back to your cash crop, because that's really important. I see too many growers plant it, forget about it, and then they've got this big buffy cover crop that they then have to go out and cultivate the hell out of to get back to a seed bed for their transplants or seeds.
Yeah, it just makes it really hard, doesn't it, to put the next cash crop in.
And that's one of the things the grower panel will be talking about tomorrow when we have our lunchtime session, which again we should have been on site, but that will have Adam Schrewer, Michael Evans, Jake Ryan from over in WA, Pete Shatbot from out west, and then Noel Jantz, and then also Michael Nash. And we'll be talking about cover crops and strip till. And I guess strip tills fit within the cover crop system, so that basically we're able to use cover crops, but we're able to transition back into our cash crop so much easier and with so much less effort and damage to the soil.
Yeah. No, great. thanks for that summary, Kelvin, and thanks to John for your expertise and input, particularly on those biofumigant crops. That was fantastic.
It was an interesting video conferencing, whatever you want to call it. It's the first time I've done it. So.
That's right. That's right. So look, thanks to you both, and look at another e-extension tool in the tool belt from the field days. So look, for more info, jump onto soilwealth.com.au if you've got any other cover cropping questions or anything else relating to soil management or plant health for that matter. And we'll catch up with you soon. So,
and
Kelvin,
just one other thing, Carl, is the whole idea of the field day down there was to interact with you, with the growers and advisors. So if you do have any specific questions or want to have a chat, give us a ring, send us an email. We're more than happy to follow up. We would have been down there for 2 days for that exact purpose. So, get on the phone or give us a ring or an email.
Fantastic. Alrighty, thanks both, and we'll chat soon. Bye.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Calvin.